If he can't even sweep straight, why does the school keep him around? The words came from a laughing teenager, broom handles still wobbling after being kicked. A few students chuckled. One teacher glanced away. Mr. Ellis bent down slowly, steadying himself as he picked up the dustpan. Not a word, not a frown, just quiet hands doing their job. But near the auditorium doors, a man in uniform paused mid-step. He didn't speak. He didn't move, yet. The hallway didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. If you believe real respect, walk silently. Leave a salute in the comments. Mr. Ellis arrived at the school each morning before the sun even touched the flagpole. He moved slowly, methodically, like a man who had learned long ago that rushing only made things worse. The janitor's keys on his belt clinked softly as he unlocked the side entrance and stepped inside. The air was still, lockers closed, lights dim. He liked it that way. No noise, just the smell of waxed floors, pencil shavings, and yesterday's rain drying on concrete. 82 years old, he still worked every weekday, sweeping corridors and fixing what could be fixed. He refused retirement, said he didn't like the idea of sitting around waiting for the end. His spine was crooked now, his right leg stiff from the shrapnel that never fully healed. But he walked without complaint. No limp, just discipline. No one knew much about him. He didn't talk about his past. He never wore anything that said veteran, but the way he folded the flag each afternoon, precise with reverence, hinted at something more. Students called him Gramps or the old broom, some with affection, some with mockery. Teachers often didn't notice him. He made things work. He stayed out of the way. Every morning before homeroom began, he did the same routine. He wiped the dust off the base of the flagpole outside the front doors. Then, slowly, carefully, he raised the American flag until it snapped gently in the breeze. One of the teachers had once asked if he wanted help. He had looked at her, kind but firm. "I've been saluting that flag longer than you've been alive, ma'am." No one offered again. The new principal, Ms. Diaz, had started just 6 weeks ago. She was efficient, young, polite. She had looked up his file once and found it nearly empty. No emergency contact, no military service listed, just hired 1984, never absent, never late. She had nodded at that, said to herself, that's the kind of employee every school needs. Then moved on. The school itself was old, brick walls with flaking paint, pipes that groaned in winter. The kind of building held together less by maintenance and more by memory. Mr. Ellis was part of that memory. He had swept those floors since Reagan was president, never asked for praise, never asked for anything. On Thursdays, he brought lunch from home. Always a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper and a black thermos that smelled faintly of engine oil. No one asked why. Some said he was just stuck in his ways. Others said he couldn't afford much else. He never explained. But every Friday, at exactly 7:45 a.m., he stood silently near the entrance as the students walked in, not to greet them, just to be there. Eyes steady, posture straight, like a sentry at post. Most passed him without a glance. Some nodded politely. A few made jokes when they thought he couldn't hear. That morning, as the 7th graders spilled into the building laughing and pushing, one boy tossed a half-eaten granola bar on the ground. "Oops," he smirked. "Clean up on aisle, old man." Mr. Ellis bent to pick it up, slowly, with care. He didn't respond, didn't look at the boy, just cleaned the mess with the same calm he always did. What he didn't see was that someone else had noticed. Someone in uniform, standing near the auditorium doors, had paused mid-step. He watched the boy laugh. He watched the janitor lower himself to one knee, and though he said nothing, he didn't walk away. By second period, word had spread. Someone had filmed the janitor kneel and posted it online. It was barely a 15-second clip, just Mr. Ellis picking up the granola bar. But the caption, "When the mop needs a walker," made it cruel. The video had started making the rounds between classes. Some students laughed in the halls. Others passed by him whispering. The old man didn't carry a phone. He didn't know. Not yet. At lunch, the same group of boys sat near the west entrance, watching him push the mop slowly down the tiled corridor. They started making jokes just loud enough to be heard. One mimicked a limp, dragging his foot behind him. Another smacked a wet floor sign and said, "Oops, we got a live one." Phones were out, recording. Still, no teacher intervened. Mr. Ellis didn't stop. He wrung out the mop, leaned into the handle, and kept moving. At one point, he bent to pick up a crushed juice box. His hand shook slightly from the strain. The hallway fell quiet. For a second, it looked like one boy, the smallest in the group, hesitated. But then the leader laughed again, louder. "Betty sleeps in the supply closet with the brooms." Mr. Ellis looked up, not at them, but at the clock. It was almost time for the bell. He finished mopping the last stretch of hallway. Then, as always, he returned the bucket to the janitor's closet, closed the door without a sound, and walked to the back courtyard where he usually ate his lunch alone. Behind him, the laughter faded as the next period began. The video kept spreading. Inside the teacher's lounge, 2 staff members sat with coffee. One had seen the video, the other hadn't. They chuckled awkwardly. "It's just kids being kids," one said. "Still," the other added, "makes you wonder why he's still working." Only Ms. Diaz, the principal, looked uneasy when she passed a group of students giggling over a phone. She paused briefly, frowned, but said nothing. In the courtyard, Ellis sat on the edge of a low planter, thermos in one hand, sandwich on a napkin. He faced the flag, eyes calm, shoulders square, as if unaware of the digital storm swirling around him. But he had seen the looks. And when a crumpled napkin rolled toward him in the wind, followed by a snickering voice from the hallway window, "Better grab that, Grandpa, before it escapes." He paused mid-bite. Still no reaction, still no words, just the quiet chewing of someone who had learned long ago that not every battle deserved a response. That's when a shadow fell across the courtyard, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing dress blues. General Marcus Harlan had arrived early for the school's Veterans Day assembly, scheduled for that afternoon. His car was still parked near the side gate. No one had expected him to walk in on foot, but here he was. He stood at the edge of the courtyard, watching the scene, watching Mr. Ellis, watching the boy in the window. He didn't speak. He didn't announce himself. He simply stood. Then slowly, very slowly, he walked toward the bench where Ellis sat. He wasn't just visiting anymore. He had seen enough. The courtyard emptied slowly after lunch. The students drifted back inside, their laughter echoing briefly before the door closed. Mr. Ellis remained seated on the bench, crumbs of his sandwich on a napkin beside him, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. The thermos sat untouched. He had seen the shadow approaching, had felt it, even before the boots stepped onto the stone path. But he didn't turn, not until the man stood just behind him. "Mr. Ellis." The voice was calm, steady, commanding. Ellis looked up, squinting slightly against the light. He didn't stand, just gave a slow, respectful nod. "General." There was silence between them, not awkward, but weighted, like 2 men who had seen too much to rush through small talk. "Didn't expect to find you here," the general said finally. "I sweep floors now," Ellis replied simply. Harlan glanced at the mop bucket near the door. "You always did clean up messes." Ellis gave a faint smile. "Still plenty of those." No one else saw that exchange. No cameras, no applause. Just 2 men in a quiet courtyard, sharing a language that didn't need translation. Minutes later, back inside the school, the hallway was empty again, except for one student. His name was Robbie, 14 years old, thin-framed, eyes still red from holding back tears. He sat cross-legged on the floor beside the lockers, hidden from sight. His math teacher had yelled at him that morning. Then his phone had been confiscated. Then he got a detention slip. He hadn't told his mother yet. He didn't know how. Ellis turned the corner, walking slower than usual. He nearly passed the boy, but something made him stop. He looked down, the keys on his belt softly clinking. "You all right, son?" Robbie didn't answer. "Not asking as a teacher," Ellis said, "just as someone who knows what trouble feels like." The boy blinked, then shrugged. "I messed up," he mumbled. Ellis crouched slowly, painfully. until he was nearly eye level with the boy. He took out a folded piece of cloth from his back pocket, clean, worn, likely older than Robbie, and handed it to him. "Real strength," Ellis said. "Ain't about how loud you talk." Robbie stared at the cloth for a moment, then took it. "Thanks," he whispered. Ellis nodded and began the slow process of rising again. No lectures, no judgment, just presence. As he walked away, Robbie watched him, really watched him, for the first time. He hadn't known who Mr. Ellis was, only that he mopped floors and never talked much. Now he wondered why his shoulders were always so straight. That afternoon, the gymnasium filled with students and staff for the Veterans Day assembly. Chairs squeaked against polished wood floors. The stage lights hummed softly. Ms. Diaz stood at the podium, nervously adjusting her notes. Backstage, General Harlan stood in silence, his eyes fixed on the back doors. Mr. Ellis entered quietly, dressed the same as always, blue work shirt, faded jeans, clean boots. He sat in the far back corner alone. No spotlight, no recognition. Yet as he sat, several students turned their heads, Robbie among them. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. But when the general took the stage and cleared his throat to speak, his first words were not in the script. "There's a man in this building who taught me everything I needed to know about honor." The room stilled. He hadn't said Mr. Ellis's name, but almost every student turned to look at the same corner of the gym. The gym fell into a heavy, focused silence. General Harlan let the pause stretch, his eyes sweeping the audience slowly, as if weighing each face. The students sat upright now. The teachers leaned forward slightly. Something was shifting. "There's a man here," the general said, "who doesn't wear medals, doesn't stand on a stage, doesn't ask for recognition." He stepped down from the podium and walked to the edge of the stage. The microphone caught his breath. "When I was 19, he continued, "I thought I knew what courage looked like. But then I met Sergeant William Ellis." Gasps rose from scattered corners of the gym. "He saved my life in 1969 outside NJ Valley. Pulled me from a burning truck while under enemy fire. Took a round through the thigh, carried me 2 miles through open terrain. Didn't speak a word the whole way, just kept moving." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photograph, faded, creased at the corners. He held it high. "This is him, same eyes, same hands, just younger." The photo showed Ellis, 20-something, covered in grime, cradling another soldier against a smoky backdrop. That soldier, barely recognizable, was the general. The gym remained frozen. No one laughed now. No one whispered. Ellis sat motionless in the back, his face unreadable. If the moment touched him, he didn't show it. He simply watched. "I came here today to talk about service," the general said, his voice steady. "But I realize the lesson is already walking these halls every single day." He turned to the principal, who stood at the edge of the bleachers, mouth slightly open. "Ms. Diaz, with your permission," he said, "I'd like to request that this school install a small plaque outside its main entrance, dedicated to Sergeant Ellis, so that generations who pass through this building know what honor looks like when it chooses silence." Ms. Diaz nodded quickly, overcome. Then, something unexpected happened. One by one, students began to stand. Not dramatically, not like a movie, just quietly, like something in the air had shifted and demanded they rise with it. Even the group of boys who had mocked him earlier stood up, unsure, awkward, but visibly moved. Robbie looked back toward the bleachers, then walked to the aisle, crossing slowly toward the back of the gym. He stopped beside Ellis's chair, then looked to the general and saluted. It wasn't perfect. His fingers were a little crooked, his arm too high, but it was real. Ellis didn't respond right away. Then finally, he stood, not quickly, but tall, straight-backed, like a soldier stepping into inspection. He didn't salute. He didn't speak. But he placed one hand gently on Robbie's shoulder. That was enough. From the stage, General Harlan nodded once, then returned to the microphone. "Some men fight wars," he said, "and some keep fighting long after the guns fall silent. Mr. Ellis never stopped serving. He just picked a different battlefield." The crowd remained standing until the general stepped off the stage. Later that day, a maintenance order was filed. Request to install commemorative plaque at main entrance. Quote to read, "In honor of Sergeant William Ellis, Who still stands. Approved unanimously. 1 week later, just before the morning bell, a small crowd gathered near the school's main entrance. It wasn't an assembly. No announcement had been made, but word had spread, quietly, that something new had been added to the brick wall beside the front doors. Mr. Ellis arrived at 6:42 a.m., as he always did. He unlocked the side gate, carried in his bucket and mop, turned off the hallway alarms. Nothing in his gait suggested he expected anything unusual. But when he stepped out to raise the flag, he stopped. There, just beneath the flagpole, a new brass plaque gleamed in the early morning light. Someone had polished it to a mirror shine. The inscription read, "In honor of Sergeant William Ellis. He never stopped serving. He just changed uniforms." He stood still for a long moment. The wind stirred the flag slightly behind him. A few students lingered at a distance. Robbie among them. He didn't approach, just watched. "Mister." Ellis finally looked down, adjusted the rope, and raised the flag in silence, each movement deliberate, like always. But this time, something softer in his shoulders. Not pride, not surprise, acceptance. That afternoon in the cafeteria, several students passed his table and nodded respectfully. One left a folded napkin beside his tray. On it, in pencil, was written, "Thank you for still standing." He said nothing, just tucked the note into his pocket and finished his sandwich. The next morning, he found Robbie waiting by the entrance. "Sir, I was wondering if I could help raise the flag today." Mr. Ellis looked at him. The boy's voice was steady, his back straight, eyes unsure but determined. Ellis didn't say yes. He just handed over the flag and showed him how to fold it, step by step, corner to corner. It wasn't fast, it wasn't perfect, but the cloth was steady between them. A few teachers watched from the windows. Ms. Diaz stood behind the glass door with her hand over her heart. From that day on, the flag never rose alone. Some mornings it was Robbie. Other times, it was a student Mr. Ellis had once helped with a flat tire, or a girl he'd walked to the nurse's office years ago. One by one, they began to ask, not out of duty, out of respect. And so, a new tradition began, one without ceremony, without speeches, without fanfare, just quiet honor at sunrise. On Veterans Day the following year, the district invited Mr. Ellis to speak at the county celebration. He declined. Instead, he sent a handwritten note to be read aloud. "I was never the loudest, not when I served and not after. But some things don't need to be shouted. They just need to be done, every day until someone notices. W. Ellis." The letter received a standing ovation. He wasn't there to hear it. He was at school, mopping the hallway by the science lab, fixing a loose door hinge, and folding a lost sweatshirt for the lost and found bin. At exactly 7:45 a.m., he stepped outside, nodded to the student beside him, and raised the flag, same as always.